na ha.
Okay, let us start. The Philippines is I mean, wala pa may ano? Screen share. Ay,
Pwede
screen
niya
share na?
makita. Hindi niya makita.
Ay, nana.
Nana.
Sige, nana saday. Sige. Okay. The Philippines is a Southeast Asian country with more than 170 different languages, having most of its citizens speaking 3 or more languages. Among the languages which dominate Philippine society is English. However, it has been observed that among those who speak English in the country, code switching is common. Code switching is defined as the alternation of two languages within a single discourse, sentence, or constituent as defined by Hamshidi and Nabi Ibrahim 2013. In Philippine classroom discourse, code switching, which is also now known as pedagogic code switching or classroom code switching, has become a tricky issue because Filipino teachers are expected to only use English in teaching content courses like mathematics and science, in addition to English as prescribed by the bilingual education policy. Now, this study titled Pedagogic Code Switching, a case study of the language practices of Filipino teachers in English language classrooms by Benjamin Baguio Mangila, next slide please, was conducted to primarily investigate the language practices of two bilingual Filipino teachers in English language classrooms. Next slide please. This study made use of the qualitative case study guided by Himes' methodological approach of the ethnography of communication. Dell Himes proposed the ethnography of communication as an approach towards analyzing patterns of language use within speech communities. Next slide, please. The respondents involved in this study were the two Filipino teachers who were teaching the English subject in the high school department. These teachers were purposely selected based on the following criteria. First, their area of specialization was English, and the second is they should have been teaching high school students. Now, to present more of this study, let us have Ms. Pala.
For the findings, next slide, please. For the findings and discussion, it is clearly revealed that both English teachers code switch in teaching, and they code switch because of several pedagogic purposes. In sentential level analysis, the results show that several code switching acts were made by the teachers in classroom discourse. Entrosentential, intersentential, and intra-word code switch types were mostly used by the teachers. Now, I included some excerpts from the transcripts. Let us have first the excerpt number 1. May I call on Miss Cheska to read the excerpt and act as a teacher?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
please open your cam?
Yes. Yes, teenagers nowadays. Now, what does the poem imply? What do you understand about the poem? What is the general thought of the poem? Unsay inyong nasabtan sa tula? Unsa siya? Unsay kahulugan sa rose in the poem?
Thank you so much, Cheska. Next slide, please. Okay, for the excerpt number 1, as we can see, as we have observed, several code switching acts committed by the first English teacher while teaching the students. In this case, both the intersentential and intrasentential code switch types were made by the teachers when she was repeatedly asking her students about what they really understood in the poem she had earlier presented. Now, the red one, the one, unsay inyong nasabtan sa tula, unsa siya, this is the intersentential code switch. As what I have discussed earlier, intersentential switching occurs when the switch of a language is done at the sentence boundaries. And the blue one is the intrasentential code wherein unsay kahulugan sa rose in the poem. Now, when we say intersentential again, it's about switching occurs within the same sentence or sentence fragment from unsay kahulugan, which is the Bisaya or Cebuano language, and then switch to English, which is rose in the poem. Now, reformulation was performed by the Teacher's Code Switching Act in this example because the teacher made concurrent translations of the questions. Now, first she used English in asking questions to the students. However, she observed that there is no feedback coming from the students, so she decided to code switch so she could effectively check her students' understanding on the given poem as well as make the lesson more comprehensible to her students. Now, code switching is needed to help less proficient students to understand a particular lesson. Now, for the next excerpt, let's have Miss Jaira. Can you please open your cam?
Yes, Yan. Yes, the poem here implies that we must gather or take the opportunities nga gi-offer sa ato. While we're young, we should take those opportunities. Kay kung tigulang na ta, we cannot take those opportunities. Unsay kinaiya sa tigulang? Dali na ka magkasakit. And if ang opportunity kay giingnan ka nga you have to go to America karon dayon, would you take the opportunity? Or would you take that?
Thank you so much, Jai. Now, the second excerpt shows that the teacher also committed several code switching acts as she was having the classroom discourse. In these excerpts, 3 code switch types were used by the teacher when she was telling to the students about what the poem implies in general. Now, first, the intersentential code switch was made by the teacher for 2 times while teaching as indicated by the 2 sentences written in red, which is, unsay kinaiya sa tigulang, dali na kay magkasakit. Now, the second, the intrasentential code switch was committed 3 times as shown some words and phrases written in blue. Kay kung tigulang na ta, and then ang opportunity kay giingnan ka, and the last one, karon dayon. Now, finally, the intra-word code switch being used in the statement is the one that is written in green, which is gi-offer. Now, the given excerpt reveals that instructional for content acquisition is the pedagogic function performed by the code switching acts made by the teacher during the instruction. As you have noticed, the teacher code switch explaining thoroughly about what the poem generally implies, as well as in providing practical and familiar situations to the students so that they could understand better the lesson being taught. Now, helping her students to easily acquire the content of the lesson was the primary purpose of the teacher why she code switched. Now, for the third excerpt, let us have again Cheska.
Yes, the worm symbolizes problems. This line tells that if naatay problema, i-take na to ang problema, then dili ta mag-control sa problema kay maunay madaot sa atua. Kindly read the last line.
Okay, thank you. Now you can see that she mostly used intrasentential code switching, which were presented in blue lines. Now, the words it take and mag control are known as intra-word code switching type. Instructional for content acquisition is also the pedagogic function performed by the code switching acts made by the teacher while discussing the lesson. In this example, the teacher also made use of the code switching as her instructional strategy to ensure that the students would better understand the lesson being taught and to effectively connect to their students using the language the students are most comfortable with. And for the last excerpt, may I call on Yvonne?
Yes, I will give this material to you. Be fast in making your haiku. Kung sayo mo mahuman, sayo tamang uli. All right, kindly start now.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. In this excerpt, it contains only one code switching act made by the teacher, which is the intersentential code switching. Now, this shows that facilitation is the other pedagogic function performed by the code switching act made by the teacher while teaching the class. Facilitation is the function performed by the teacher's code switching act because in this excerpt, the role of the teacher switches from being of a content or a language instructor to that of being a facilitator in the classroom. Now, the researcher pointed out that Filipino teachers often use code switching to ensure students' active participation, not only during the class discussion, but also in accomplishing certain activities in the classroom. Now, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, it clearly shows that instructional for content acquisition is also the pedagogic function, which was performed by the code switching acts that were made by the teacher while teaching the students. Moreover, the given result supports the findings of another study conducted by Leo Ann Bake and Han 2004 that high school teachers use Korean more frequently than English, particularly in giving background information, as well as highlighting important information to aid students in understanding the lesson being taught and aim to promote students' understanding of the lesson being taught. Now, the foregoing result supports one of the major findings of Susanti's 2010 that case study that teachers often code switch during classroom instructions to emphasize as well as clarify some important points to help students effectively understand the lesson or topic they are teaching. Now, for code switch also for reiteration in order to aid students understanding the lesson. And these examples or the excerpts that they have read also reveal that the teacher used code switching as her teaching strategy because she believed that the use of a more familiar language in teaching would contribute to a student's better understanding of the lesson. Now, in pedagogic functional level analysis, the results reveal that the teachers frequently use code switching mostly for instructional or content acquisition. And the findings also show that teachers sometimes code switch for reformulation and facilitation, but they rarely code switch for language acquisition and habitual purposes. Let's have Munin for the conclusion of the study.
For the conclusion of the study, code switching is a common language practice of both English teachers during classroom instruction, and they make use of code switching as an instructional strategy for several pedagogic purposes. In the sentential level analysis, several code switching acts are made by the first English teacher within the same utterance, while the second teacher rarely code switches during her discourse in the classroom. Intersentential and intrasentential and intra-word code switch types are commonly used by the teacher, while extrasentential tag code switch is not used by both English teachers. In the pedagogical functional level analysis, teachers frequently use code switching during the classroom discourses, mostly for instructional for content acquisition, which is similar to the findings revealed by the previous studies of Loy, Ann, Beck, and Han in 2004, Ahmad and Rusov in 2009, Keo, Han, Kim, Ann in 2010, Susanti in 2010, Den and Tang in 2011, and Martin in 2014. The foregoing results clearly indicates that teachers usually act as a linguistic bridge between the lesson to be taught and learned and their English language teachers. Teachers sometimes use code switching in teaching for reformulation and facilitation, but they rarely use code switching for language acquisition and habitual purposes. Furthermore, code switching is used by teachers not only for communicative devices and as an instrument to enhance discourse, such as emphasizing a point and then mitigating a message, but also, most importantly, as a scaffolding device that effectively facilitates and optimizes students' learning in culturally and linguistically diverse classroom. And those are the conclusions of pedagogic code switching, a case study of language practices of Filipino teachers in English language classrooms.